Hey girl, are your healthy habits all over the place or non-existent? Do you wish you could find true food freedom, move your body for joy, and really just talk a little nicer to yourself? If you have tried to habit hack your health, but the strategies you've tried just haven't worked for you in your busy lifestyle, then this podcast is for you. Hey, I'm Emily Nichols, habit and fitness coach, behavior change specialist, and Taco Tuesday enthusiast. Hey, I am here to tell you there is an easier way than what we've been taught about our health and our habits. How do I know? Well, because I've transformed my own life through habit hacking, and now my family gets the best of me, and I now help my clients do the same. I'm now going to teach you how to create healthy habits in less time, guilt-free for all seasons of your life. It's not your fault your habits haven't worked, my friend. We just have to do them differently. So, are you ready to feel empowered and transform your habits and life? Then let's do this. You're listening to episode 219 of Habit Hack Your Health. Hey friend, welcome back to the show. Happy September. I hope you are doing well. When seasons change, we're going into fall. A lot of folks are going back, their kids are going back to school. My kids have been back since like August 1st. I know we start really early. Some start really late. I'm all a fan of starting early, by the way. And so are my kids. They want to be back into a routine, and I do too. And I keep hearing this phrase that September is the new January. It's like, thinking of like New Year resolutions and like getting your stuff together when it comes to taking care of your health. But I know, and you know, from hosting this podcast, from working with clients and talking to you all in my audience, time is really challenging. You don't have a lot of time to spare. And usually the first thing to go when life feels really chaotic, like I feel like I should get paid like at this point to be like a mom Uber for the amount of drive time I have with my kids, which I love because pretty soon my kiddos, my oldest will be driving on his own and I won't have those one-on-one conversations with them anymore. I'll save a little bit more in time and sanity and gas money, but I would love to connect with him more too. But that's for a subject for another day. Time is really hard. It's hard to make time for your health, and that's the first thing to go. That is the first thing to go, your own health. So I've been thinking about this a lot, and I know you like listening to podcasts. Hence, you're here, you're listening to my show. I hope you have connected with a lot of the guests that I've had on my show and go listen to their show as well. But I don't know if you're like this, but sometimes I get on information overload. I'm trying to learn all the things, and then I just have analysis paralysis. I don't do anything, right? So I've been thinking about this a lot, and I have a special announcement coming out tomorrow. Well, there'll be a special bonus episode of the show. If you're on my email list, you'll get a notification there as well. But I've been really thinking a lot about you and how I can best serve you and streamline the way we can serve you to make the most of your time, to make the most of your learning, and to really just take action, to get out of that analysis paralysis. So fun surprise coming tomorrow. I'm working with a few of the best experts, and I've been so blessed to get to know and call a lot of these ladies friends from collaborating together on so many other different projects, being guests on each other's show. So I have something really exciting to share with you tomorrow, just a little teaser for you. That's it. I'm just so excited. And it's been fun working with them, and it's super fun just seeing what a big servant heart that they have for you and wanting to serve you in the best way possible and meeting you where you are. And that's what I try to do with all my programming here at the show. And I know you want to take care of yourself, and I know time, it's just really hard to find the time, right? So tomorrow, a special announcement to how we're going to help you make the time. But today's episode, we're going to go a little deep. I want to know, do you feel lost? Do you feel like you've lost yourself? You know what I mean? Do you feel like you lost yourself? If someone was to ask you, like, hey, what do you like to do for fun? Like, what interests you? Would that be a question that's hard for you to answer? Most of the time, it's like, yeah, I don't even know what I like to do anymore. And I feel like that really starts when we become moms a lot of times. From the moment you have that baby, or from the moment like you're pregnant, right? There's so much access to information out there that I feel like we get to the point where on information overload. We're learning all the different techniques for taking care of newborns, and then when they're a toddler, and then when they're starting kindergarten, and now my kids are in middle school and high school, and I'm still looking into all this information about like raising teenagers, helping preteens. Holy moly, this is a whole next level of like food that these boys are going through as well. And I feel like we're just on information overload. And from the moment you have that baby, you start looking into all this information just with the best of intentions, wanting to be the best mom possible. But then you feel like a failure because you're not. You feel like you're falling short of all the expectations you see out there. Sometimes I wish I was, like a mom when my mom was like a new mom, because there wasn't all this information out there. Like you figure it out yourself, and you don't compare yourself as much to everyone's highlight reel, because no one was posting anything on social media because there wasn't social media. But you just immerse yourself into being that child's mom, nurturing everything and everyone around you. And you get to the point where your whole identity is in your kids. What do you like to do for fun? I don't know. Take care of my kids. Moms do 2 times the work at home. Hence why women have to do habits differently. That's why I lean so much into my Atomic Habits for Women philosophy and all of my coaching. And you'll see that interlaced in every episode I talk about, because we carry such an invisible load. I actually just saw a post online. I don't know the specifics, but it was like when a woman gets married, they actually take on 2 times the amount of work. Oh, I know what it was. Like, have you seen those reels or TikToks where they're like, girl dinner? I think that's so funny. But it's just like, yeah, like you make yourself a really simple dinner, but then when you have a family or a spouse, then you're like, oh, I'm making this big elaborate meal and doing this and setting all these expectations on myself, right? There's such an invisible load we carry from the moment we get married, but especially when we have kids. I mentioned this in our episode today with our guest, but this really made me think back to when I was a young mom, when my kiddos were real little. And I remember my husband, he has all the hobbies. Like he's a big outdoorsman, he runs, like that's not just for exercise, like that is like his passion. That's not a passion for me. Run spelled backwards is nerd, and that is a nerd for me. But anyways, my husband Dustin had asked me, I remember years ago, I was a young mom, and he was like, babe, like, what are you doing for fun? Like, what are your hobbies? And I was like, I don't know. I don't even know what I like to do anymore. I don't even know. I couldn't answer that question. And as I've gone through my own transformation and really started leaning into my own health and self-care, then I really started digging deeper into things for myself, self-care and habits for myself without the guilt. Now, this has been a process since 2015. And, my hobbies aren't just, working out, serving my clients, the podcast, special projects, what we have, creating items for the Habit Hack Shop. Like those are not my hobbies. That is what I do. That is what I'm passionate about. But what do I do that is just for me? Being a mom is one of the biggest parts of my identity, but I can't let that be my only identity. I'm also a wife, a friend, a coach who loves to be outside. I love just walking by myself. I love being outdoors and paddleboarding. I love picking up a real book and reading fun books. I'm passionate about dogs and my dog in particular. This conversation was a really good reminder for me that I can't get so caught up in what I do because I am so passionate about it, and not letting that be my hobby, but also incorporating things in my life, habits of fun that are just for me. There's nothing else tied to it, no one else tied to it. And that's really hard. It's really hard. We lose ourselves in our identity as a mom, especially sometimes in our career, sometimes being someone's spouse. And I really want you to take a step back and ask yourself, who are you and ask yourself if you have totally lost who you are. And girl, we're going to find her again. So today we're going to help you with my guest, Stephanie Rosenfield. She is the host of the 5-Minute Shift for Moms. She's a former speech pathologist turned life coach for overwhelmed moms, and she helps her clients navigate the internal and external chaos that often creeps up during motherhood without losing their what. Okay, so she's using firsthand experience, training as a life coach, and just a judgment-free approach. She's helping moms shift their habits and mindset to become the mom they've always hoped they could be. So we're going to dig deep and explore finding yourself again. We're going to talk about some questions to ask yourself and do a little self-discovery, and talk about habits, of course, like habits of fun and experimentation to help you find yourself again and create your identity outside of your kids. And of course, we'll talk about some habit loops at the end. So before we get started, I want you to think of these questions. I'm going to mention them again at the end of the episode and see if you're able to answer these a little bit differently. Okay, so who are you? What do you like to do for fun? What hobbies do you have just for you? Okay, that's it. Recognize being a mom is more than just taking care of the kids. There is a big invisible load that we carry, and this episode is about lightening that load a little bit, digging deep into remembering and finding out who you are right now in this season of your life, which will allow you to show up as the best mom possible for your kids. It's a win-win for everybody. Of course, I'll be sharing my 3 biggest takeaways for you at the end of the episode. I'll ask those questions to you again, and of course, give you a little habit loop at the end. Okay, get a pen and paper ready to take some notes. Have an open heart, ready to find yourself again with our guest, Stephanie Rosenfield. All right, gang. Thank you so much again for tuning into the show. I am so excited to talk today with Stephanie Rosenfield of the 5-Minute Shift for Moms. I love simple. I love time saving. It sounds like this is what we're going to be getting into, Stephanie. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Emily. I'm excited to be here.
Same. Okay. Well, let's get into it. This show is all about transforming our habits, and I want to hear what your definition is of self-transformed. What comes to mind when you hear that phrase, Stephanie?
I love this question, and it really got me thinking. And for me, it really means really constantly working to take better care of myself so that I can take better care of the people around me. And I see this in my own life and the lives of my private coaching clients, but it's noticing that when I am taking care of myself, that it actually is benefiting my entire family and the people around me. So that's really how I define self-transformed. And I think it's also constantly discovering, okay, who am I? Who am I today? Who am I this month? Who am I this year in this moment? And making the best decisions for me and my family based on that, and looking inward instead of to the societal expectations or what other people are doing. Yeah. So in a nutshell, that is what self-transformed is to me.
I love that. Well, you're going on your own self-discovery, and sometimes it's really hard to block out all of that outside noise and just really dig into, okay, like, who am I? How can I best take care of myself? And the more you do that, the more you do notice, like, okay, everyone wins when I take care of myself.
Yes, exactly.
For sure. Well, let's talk about you a little bit more so our audience can get to know you. What is your own transformation story, Stephanie? What has led you to really what you do today, and more importantly, who you are today?
Yeah. So I started my career as a pediatric speech therapist. So I had this strong background in early childhood development. And I was working with really young kids and their families, like 18 months to 3 years old, and then also kids in elementary school. And I noticed that while those kids needed a lot of support, there was really a gap in the support that the parents, especially moms, were receiving. I was seeing day after day these stressed out, overwhelmed moms, and the main source of information for them was Google or Instagram or all of these blogs, and they were just overwhelmed and just not getting the support that they needed. And then once I became a mom, I really noticed that the big contributor was this overwhelming amount of information that was being thrown at me and other moms, right? I remember, oh, should I sleep train or not sleep train? And all of a sudden you're bombarded with research from, people with PhDs who say don't do it. And then research from other people with PhDs that say do it. And it had this feeling of I failing. So when I had my first son, who's 6 now, I thought I'd be great, right? I'm like, I have this background in early childhood development. Like I work with kids. This is going to be awesome. I'm going to be great at it. But after a few months, like you would have looked at me maybe on Instagram or Facebook and been like, she's killing it. Look, she's smiling, she's happy. But internally, I was a hot mess. I was stressed. I was anxious. I felt like I was failing. And it was hard for me to admit, but at the time I was secretly jealous of my friends who didn't have kids, right? I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm not good at this. I miss my old life. And there was this one time when my son was 18 months and he was like wanting something with this toy truck and he kept pushing it at me and he was frustrated and I was trying to help him, but I had no idea what it was. And he started to get really upset and I started to get really frustrated and I just lost it. I screamed and then I saw his little face crumple and oh my gosh, the guilt I felt. I sat in the bathroom with my head in my hands and I was like, something needs to change. And I'd like to say that was the moment that everything changed, but it wasn't, right? There were so many other moments because I thought things would just get better. I had to just figure it out. Good moms, just figure this out. We just got to get through it. And the only advice that was available was all of this stuff that I was reading online that really wasn't working for me, right? Like these strategies that weren't working. And there was sort of this missing link. I had this background in early childhood development, but I didn't have the strategies to manage my emotions in really stressful situations. And I was looking at society to tell me how I was doing. And by their standards, I was failing, right? And around that time, personally, we experienced a sudden death in our family, my brother-in-law. And it was like a really terrible, and still is, experience, but it was really eye-opening. Because I think for me, it was like, okay, Steph, you got to figure this out because you want to be happy here. You want to have this family and be the mom that you want to be. Though that sounds a little cheesy, right? Like I really knew that I wasn't going to figure it out. It wasn't just going to come to me, that I had to figure it out. So that's when I found coaching. Like I realized I did have the power to fix things. So it's been a 6-year journey of me applying the tools. I went through a year-long life coaching certification, a 10-month nervous system practitioner certification. And so I pair that with my background in early childhood development to coach moms, right? To empower moms to have a happier, calmer, more confident motherhood. So that's where I decided to spend my time.
I love that story so much. Thank you so much for sharing that stuff because it was, like you said, 6 years. This just didn't happen like yesterday, right? It was a whole process for you learning. And that's so true. Because I feel like when we become moms, there's information overload and so many varying opinions from other moms, family members, what you're reading online. And it's like, what is the right decision? I'm failing everywhere. And sometimes it's a matter of, unfortunately, something really horrible in your life happening to kind of put things into perspective, like you said, to be like, okay, I need to find a space where I can really take care of myself, lean into who I am. So like we talked about already, be the best mom you can be for everyone else and be the best person for you too. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm sure there's a lot of moms out there that are like, I need your help, Stephanie. Well, let's talk about, I love today's subject we're talking about, and that's kind of about our identity, right? I know my boys are older, they're 15 and 11, but recalling back to when they were born, I was mom. 100 days, 100%, 365 days a year. Like that was who I was. And I know I personally felt like I lost a little bit of my identity and who I am too. And we just get so caught up in that one identity. The other parts of us sometimes gets lost. I don't know if any other mom or woman listening to this has ever felt like I feel lost. How can we rediscover ourselves through what you call effective delegation and really just digging in deep to that self-discovery like we talked about to find ourselves outside of that mom identity?
Yeah, this is a really great question. And you're so right. The moment we become moms, literally the moment the baby comes out, it's like something really interesting happens. Our identity completely shifts. All of a sudden, we define ourselves by clean kitchens, organized pantries, our kids' behavior. And this may not, I mean, not surprising to any of the listeners, but like studies show in the US that moms do twice the amount of housework and childcare labor as husbands. And what's really interesting too, Eve Rodsky, she wrote the book Fair Play, which talks about couples like delegating and splitting up the workload at home. What she says, it's not just about the time that moms spend, but it's about the types of activities that they're doing that affect their mental health. So it's not just that we spend all this time, but it's the things, the laundry, the kid, like all of these things that can really affect our mental health. So when I talk about delegating, it's delegating what you want to do less of to create more time for yourself. And again, this comes with, we have the idea of what good moms should do. They should do the laundry or cook or all of the things. And it's redefining it by identifying what do I want to do less of? And I have an example. There was a client that I was coaching and she did the laundry for everyone in her house. And she was spending so much time doing the laundry, folding it, and including her husband's. And she said, you know what, Steph, like, I don't want to do his laundry anymore. He can do it and he can fold it. But she was so nervous to have this conversation because of what he might think about what she should be doing, what she thinks about what she should be doing. And through coaching, what we did is we worked together to be able to have a conversation with him was one, like let's be together. Like, you're my friend. I like you. Let me just be honest with where I'm coming from here and how I'm feeling. And also with the understanding of he doesn't have to be 100% happy with this request, right? It's not like her goal isn't to make him happy. So she had this conversation with him and he started to do his laundry. He started to do his laundry. And I have another example, and this one I really love. I was coaching a mom and she really wanted to start figuring out how to work out in the morning. And she was not an early person who woke up before the kids. So she talked to her husband about, hey, how about you do the half hour of breakfast where you make the kids breakfast while I work out in the basement. And again, the goal here wasn't like him to be like, yeah, I love that idea, but just the idea of coming to him as this equal, being like, I'm struggling to figure out working out. I'll get them up. You do breakfast so I can get this in. And he was more than happy. Like, again, like he did it. So I think part of it is recognizing what are the things I want to do less of and having that conversation with your partner as an equal, right? As like, I like you, you like me, we're both in this together. We want to help each other out. And the other thing I have to say about this too is what can I say no to? And yesterday I received like this 40-page report from my 3-year-old's preschool class. It had pictures and all this like information. And I had a choice, right? I could sit there and spend, and again, these teachers are fantastic. The time and energy they put into it, I really do appreciate it. But I could sit there and take the hour that I was going to eat lunch and listen to an audiobook and read through this. Or I could eat lunch and listen to an audiobook and know that I'll get to it. If there was anything that was concerning, they would reach out to me. Like it was something that I just said no to. Similarly to like a client who, she told me, she's like, you know what? I just walked over the messy pile of laundry last night and sat in bed and read a book because I knew that's what would make me a happier mom and that the laundry would get done.
Okay, so much to unpack there. So many good things, Stephanie. I think we all need to realize we have so many shoulds in our lives. And when we think of delegation, I don't think think of like removing things off our plate. A lot of times we're thinking, so you can add more, right? Oh, I don't want to do this, so I can do this instead. It's not necessarily so I can take care of myself. It's like, oh, so I can actually have time to finish up those work emails. I'm going to ask someone to do the laundry so I can do this other activity that I have in my head. And a lot of times it just comes down to having open conversations and communication and learning to say no. Like that can be a habit in itself, saying no, thank you, and letting that be a full sentence and having that empowerment to be like, wow, look at all this energy and capacity I've given back to myself, right? And, I feel like we talk about this a lot, and we teach on a series called Atomic Habits for Women, where this is what happens, right? We have so many reactive things happening in our day where we're like, oh yeah, I should be doing the laundry. Or like you said, you got that stuff for your kids preschool, but you wanted to like sit down, listen to a book, eat your lunch. Like most of us would have been like, oh, well, here's this thing I have to do. Now I'm not going to do this. And it gets pushed to the side more and more and more until the habit is I don't take care of myself at all, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that's such a good point, right? We think, okay, I can ask him to do his laundry if I'm doing something else that's productive or for the family, not something for
Mm.
me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, I love this so much. Well, and that helps you lean into your identity outside of being the mom. And the mom is not just like taking care of the kids. Like you said, it's also like, oh, I got to do the laundry, I got to do the dishes. Yes, if you have a partner and they help, that's great. But we carry such a mental load that, that invisible load of motherhood that they talk about. We take a lot of that on ourselves since we are so nurturing beings, like from the get go, right?
Mm-hmm.
As far as like our own mom identity, how can we integrate habits of fun and experimentation into our lives for those of us that are listening and they're like, what do I even like to do for fun anymore? Like
I hear that.
oh my gosh, I remember years ago, my husband, when my kids were really, 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 really little, he was like, babe, you don't really have any hobbies anymore. I'm like, yeah, I do. And I was like, taking care of the kids. I was like, that's not a hobby. That's part of my role that I've stepped into as a mother. I love it. It's a passion, but who am I? So where can we incorporate some habits of fun, experimenting to really find ourselves? Because I bet a lot of women just like cranked up the volume now, like, yeah, like what do I like to do for fun now? And how can I create habits of fun to find that out?
I love that question. And I hear it from most of my clients. And I think it makes them feel a little bit of guilt and shame too. Like really sad to admit that they don't have something. And it's so interesting, right? Kids get to play and have fun without commitment. They can be a painter one day, a gymnast the next, without worrying about selling their paintings on Etsy or going to the Olympics. And I think that the experimentation piece is so important because we're perfectionists. I was talking to a client and she's like, I really want to learn how to knit. And then I can open an Etsy store and then I can sell this on Etsy. It's like, wait. Like, what if you just like didn't commit to a 6 month knitting class, but you just like tried it for a week? The experimentation of what if I could try this thing? What is like in my wildest dreams, something that I ever thought that would sound fun? And what if I just tried it? And what if I just saw how it went? So that client, the knitting client, and which is really interesting too, because part of this was the knitting class was at night and she has 4 kids and she really wanted to do this 6:30 p.m. knitting class. So part of this was the delegation, the asking, the talking to her husband, I really want to try this. Can you do dinner on Tuesday night for the kids while I go? So that was part of it, right? And it was her recognizing trying this out is going to help me be like a happier mom and like better for them. So she tried the knitting class. And you know what? She didn't really like it. Like she like, oh, it was fun. I liked meeting the other moms, but it wasn't this idea. She didn't feel like a failure afterward. She's like, what can I try next? It felt good to go out. It felt good to try something new. So she tried a pottery class. And that was her thing for a couple months. And I think that that's important because it doesn't have to be this, you don't have to become this knitter or this painter or this potter. And another client of mine, which I loved this story, she used to be a D1 swimmer in college and she had stopped swimming for 20 plus years because kids and because the swimming was so competitive. So she figured out, how can I bring this thing that I loved so much back into my life in a way that works for me? And so she experimented with going to the Y and bringing the kids to the kids space. So I think that it doesn't need to be this big thing, this new hobby that you go out and that you do and you really crush. It's just the experimenting like a child in, if I wanted to try something, what would that be?
We talk about this a lot when I talk to clients about like what type of movement they would like to do, what type of exercise regimen. I'm like, what did you like to do as a kid? Going back to that childlike energy where it was like, oh, well, I really loved riding my bike. Like I loved riding my bike. We're like, great. See if you can buy a bike and like go for rides outside or go take a spin class or something like that. When we kind of go back to like, that carefree version of ourselves, you might be like, oh, I really loved dance or I really loved art. It could be as simple as I'm going to get a coloring book and color every evening and not let it turn into some big thing, right? Like I'm a big listener of podcasts, personal development books. I listen to a lot of books, and I used to love to read like an actual paper book, nothing like personal development or habit wise. And this whole year I've been focused on like, I'm going to get actual books and just read fun books in the evening. And it's just lit up my soul. I'm like, this is for nothing else other than just to find that moment of respite for myself and do something just for me. Because a lot of times when I'm listening to personal development book or digging into habit research, it's to help other people, right? Which is great, but I need something for myself too. And like you said, not having it have some big end goal and doing that experimentation, right? Your client had that big goal of I'm knitting, I'm going to do this. Then she's like, oh, I don't even like knitting, right?
Yeah, it's so true.
I love that so much, Stephanie. So lots of great ways to experiment with fun. Well, I know we're talking a lot about taking time for ourselves. And I know a lot with my audience, we really struggle with finding time, but also the guilt that sometimes that comes with taking time for yourself. Because this all sounds great. And they're like, okay, I'm going to ask for help. But then while you're doing the thing for yourself, you're like, ugh, I feel so guilty. So how can we make that time for ourselves more of a non-negotiable in our lives? Just like brushing our teeth is kind of like a non-negotiable, right? It's a habit you do unconsciously. You're going to do it no matter what. That way you're making the most of the time you have for yourself and doing it with the best of intentions versus coming from a place of guilt, even if you are taking the time for yourself.
I love this question. And I think, right, as moms, we fall to the bottom of our own totem pole in our lives. And it's like we were sold this idea as, growing up of reach for the stars, you can become anything. Like we're, like literally, like I think, in our generation, it was like women can become anything. And then it's sort of like the moment that you became a mom, it was like, nope. Sorry, we lied. Society lied to us. Like you're the bottom. And it's really interesting. There's this book called All Joy, No Fun by Jennifer Senior. She's like a writer for The Atlantic. And she really talks about parental well-being and the effects that kids have on parental mental health. And what she found is that having children does not improve parents' happiness. Like research shows that having children doesn't improve parents' happiness. In fact, it has a net zero or slightly negative effect. So it can slightly compromise parents' happiness. And really what this shows is that part of this is recognizing that as moms, we need to take our happiness into our own hands because people around us, things around us aren't going to make us happy or make us feel, aren't going to improve our mood. And why is that important? Because our mood affects people around us. I had a client who, her daughter was in daycare until 5:15. This mom worked full time, and she would rush to finish working by 4 to pick her daughter up. She's like a good mom, picks her daughter up early from daycare. I should spend more time with her. She's away from me all day. Well, the nights were a disaster. There would be meltdowns from the daughter. The mom was frustrated, and what she recognized is she was giving herself zero time for herself during the day, and she was approaching her daughter with that energy. So she started every day watching an episode of Grey's Anatomy from 4 to 5 and then picking her daughter up. And she was like, oh my gosh, Steph, like the nights are so much better. I am so much more energized and happier. And it's literally shifted our relationships and the connection that we have at night. So what this mom noticed was by actually giving herself the time and space to do something, again, it doesn't have to be anything big. It was watching an episode of Grey's Anatomy. Her mood lifted and it affected her daughter. So I think a huge part of this is that it's not, oh, it's nice to, maybe we should, like, yeah, let's like do some childlike play. Sounds great. It's imperative because if a mom isn't focusing on her own happiness or joy, no one else is. Nothing else is going to do it for her. And while we think, oh, our kids come first, we're actually not putting our kids first because of the way that we're approaching them. So I think that's the key to it. Making it a non-negotiable is noticing that you are a better mom and you will parent in line with your values when you are filled up and energized and feeling good about yourself.
Yeah. Kind of going back to that self-discovery again, right, Stephanie, where it's like, oh, something so simple as watching Grey's Anatomy. Like my daughter's not having as many meltdowns. I'm not having as many meltdowns. just because I took a little time for myself to do something to kind of unplug, something that brought me joy. And over time, that loses the guilt, right? Because then we're like, wow, look how this has a positive effect on everyone else. And I love how you said, like, actually, you're not putting your children first by, showing up, ready to have your own meltdown as well. We've all been there, right? And I love how this was so simple. I think sometimes
Yeah.
we make it so much bigger in our heads, like, oh, I need to do like this 10-step self-care routine. And that's like overwhelming and that's not realistic or sustainable. Like she just watched Grey's Anatomy. Like that's
Yeah.
all.
And when I tell moms, it's like, take data. Like I had a mom who, on the weekend, she was like, I really want to like stay home while my husband brings the kids to soccer, but I can't do that because it's family time. I'm working all week. It's family time. We all have to go together. I was like, all right, let's just try an experiment. This doesn't have to become the new normal. We're going to take some data. You're going to do it twice. Let's just try it this Saturday and next. And she was like really nervous too. She was worried about her kid, right? Like she just felt really, it was hard for her, but she did it. And she was like, when they came back, I was so happy and excited to see them and so much more engaged. So it's really taking your own data to any of you listeners out there. It's like, what if I just tried this and I just saw? And hey, if the data doesn't show that it's working, I can just go right back. But like experiment and take some data and just see what happens.
Well, sometimes, like you said, having that data, having that little experimentation, that's facts versus feelings sometimes, because sometimes we make it so much bigger in our head. And then when we see just black and white data to be like, oh, that wasn't so bad. Everyone's happier. Like then you're able to move forward and keep that momentum going, taking care of yourself for sure. I love that so much. So, Stephanie, I have loved this conversation. I think I could dig into this forever and ever and ever, but I hope everyone is feeling a little bit more empowered now to lean into their own identity outside of being a mom. That is such a big pillar of who we are. And I get that is one of the most important jobs that we'll have, but it's not the only job that you have and the only people you need to take care of in your life, because you got to take care of yourself. Your kids will move away someday and you want to be able to make the time you have with them in your home and when they go off as young adults someday. So modeling for them what self-care is all about is, I feel like, such an important aspect as well. So Stephanie, where can everyone connect with you, find out more about your show as well?
Yes. So you can check me out at the 5-Minute Shift for Moms, which are quick 5-minute podcast tips that you can take something away immediately and implement. I also hang out a ton on Instagram at stephanie.rosenfield. Come and say hi. And if you want some free things or to schedule a consult, I am at stephaniercoaching.com/consult.
Awesome. We'll make sure to link all of that in the show notes for everybody as well. But Stephanie, thank you so much for this important conversation. It's been a delight chatting with you.
Thank you for having me, Emily. This is so fun.
Stephanie, thank you so much for this eye-opening conversation. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, re-listening back to this conversation I had with Steph was really enlightening and eye-opening for me to be like, man, I really need to make sure I'm doing things that are just for me, like no strings attached, where I am doing something where it's going to benefit my kids, it's going to benefit my husband, you all. I need to lean in and just find something for myself. And doing those habits of fun and experimentation is where it is at. I love it so much. So, gang, I'm going to ask you those questions again that I asked you at the beginning of the episode, and I'm wondering if you can answer them with a little bit more clarity, or take a pen and paper out and do a little bit digging deeper into some self-discovery here. So, who are you? And it's not just a mom. Who are you? What do you like to do for fun? What are hobbies that you have that are just for you? Steph, this was so eye-opening again to talk to you about, finding yourself again and not losing yourself in being a mom, right? A lot of times I think a lot of women, they are like, I'm just a mom. Like being a mom is such a big blessing and is such a big job. It is such a big honor. But one day, those kiddos, it is your job to help them grow up to be responsible young adults and have a different kind of relationship with them as they are young adults. And you're going to be on your own then someday, girl. So we need to dig deep and like find out who we are now and model this to our kids. So let's dig deep into these 3 big takeaways with our conversation with Stephanie Rosenfield. I could have had a lot more takeaways, by the way, but here's what my big takeaways were. So, and if you're new to Habit Hack Your Health, I do this at the end of every conversation, after end of every episode with a guest, because sometimes I know you're driving, you're folding laundry, you get a little distracted, hence why women have to do habits differently. So think of this as the cliff notes for yourself, okay? So let's talk about it. Number 1, delegate what you want to do less of to have more time for yourself. Yes, a lot of times we feel like we don't have time to do anything fun or a hobby for ourselves because we're doing all the things. We carry that invisible load. There's so many internal and external distractions, right? That's why I created my private podcast series, Atomic Habits for Women. It's always linked in the show notes for you because it really lets you kind of see like, oh, I just need to do habits differently because women have so many internal and external distractions. However, when we think of delegating or asking for help, that often comes with a sense of guilt, okay? Shoulda, woulda, couldas, right? You don't have to feel guilty asking for help because everyone is going to win around you when you are taking care of yourself. And seeing it more in that light, I feel like will lose the guilt a little bit more for you. You're not doing this to be like selfish, to be like, well, I don't want to take care of my kids. It's like, no, I want to show up as the best part of me for my kids. And sometimes that means delegating to do less so I can do more for me. So think about what can you say no to? Recognizing that you and your partner are equals and they can help you and more than likely are more than happy to help you if you just ask, right? But I think a good point we talked about in this conversation was to do less doesn't mean to do more of work or to do more for somebody else. It's like, no, what can you do just for you? That's going to help you lean into your identity and who you are. The next one is exploring habits of fun, experimenting. I love the example Stephanie gave that she worked on with her clients. And I mean, you need to take your happiness into your own hands, like Stephanie said. I love it so much. And you just make it so simple. I loved the Grey's Anatomy example. I personally, a big habit hack I do at the end of the day before my kids get off the bus, my youngest one in particular, is I stop working and I usually go sit outside and I'll listen to music or like watch funny like dog videos before he gets off the bus. That's like my cue that it's like, okay, it's time to turn off work mode, and it's just relaxing and gets me not so wired before he gets home, and I feel a lot more present. And it's so simple. It's so small. So we need to make it a little bit less complicated in our minds and do some more habits of fun and experiment. You know, like the knitting example she gave. The lady wanted to knit and then she did it and she was like, I guess I really didn't like that, you know, and exploring that as you go through different seasons of your life. But take your happiness into your own hands because y'all, your kids, your whole home will feed off of that energy. Have you ever heard the expression, if mom ain't happy, nobody happy? Maybe I just heard that growing up in my home, right? But it's true. You can set the tone and energy in your home. And I know I want a light, a fun, an airy energy in my home and not a heavy, dark, stressed out energy. Okay? So create your own happiness using those habits of fun and experimentation. And then lastly is to gather data on how you feel and everyone around you. Like, take note of that energy, okay? This is one of the things we talk about in the Mindset Habits Accelerator, one of my signature mini courses, where we really dig deep into like, as far as like confidence and self-care, really using a journal to get those words out and to reflect, right? A lot of times you need to kind of just see if there's some habit loops and triggers already happening in your life that are causing you to feel either a negative way or a positive way, and taking note of that, right? Sometimes if we just like kind of like laissez-faire, think about it in the back of our head, it's not as real as writing it down. So taking note of when you do this habit or this habit loop, it makes you feel this way and everyone else around you versus this, right? It's all about self-discovery and really digging deep, and using a journal, just like a simple pen to paper, is a really great habit hack to help you do that. So, of course, we're going to give you a little habit loop here at the end. This is what we dig deep inside of my Healthy Habits Accelerator program. We focus on food freedom, mindset, and movement, but we really dig super deep into habit loops. Like there's over 60 habit loops around those 3 fundamental needs, but there's already a lot of habit loops you have throughout your day. So let's habit loop what we're talking about today with finding yourself. So maybe you already have a habit loop. It's an unhealthy habit loop. Maybe you are feeling burnt out. You are feeling resentful because everyone is like, it's chaotic. You feel burnt out and you are not able to take time for yourself. The routine is to journal what would make you happy and do some self-discovery. Do the actual thing. On the other end, the reward, you're going to lose the guilt and find yourself again, okay? That's kind of big picture, but when you do start feeling those triggers to make you feel resentful and burnt out, sit down, do a little self-discovery, and on the other end, you feel more in control, like you are finding yourself, then go take action, my friends. So, gang, I'll make sure to link everything, Stephanie, in the show notes, girl. Thank you so much for this conversation. I loved it so much. Gang, everything's always linked in the show notes for you if you want to grab one of the accelerators or any of the items from the Habit Hack Shop to help you take action with your healthy habits. I got you covered, girl. And make sure you tune in tomorrow. I have something exciting for you with some of my very best podcast besties to help you make time for your healthy habits. I'm so excited. Keep on showing up for you, and know that being a mom is a very important role, but it doesn't define who you are. And I hope after this episode, you're going to dig a little bit deeper and remember who the heck you are, girlfriend. All right, gang, I'll catch up with you tomorrow for our bonus episode. Hey girl, real quick before you go, did you know I have a secret podcast where I talk all about why most habit strategies don't work for us women? Spoiler alert, it's not our fault. Visit bit.ly/Atomic Habits for Women, it's linked in the show notes, to access my secret podcast series and have your biggest aha moment about why and how women have to do habits differently. And if you love the podcast, the number one way you can thank me is to leave a rating and review in iTunes. That way, more mamas can find the show. Love and appreciate you, friend. We'll see you next time.